Yeah, my father came up here at age 20 in 1886 to teach at Friendswood Academy, a Friends school up near Reedsburg, west of Reedsburg.
He was at that time a teacher.
He was just beginning of his career as a teacher. He taught for 40 years, beginning in 1900 at Earlham College. So this is back before that, 1886, that he was teaching country school. And then he came back as, about 1907 as a graduate student in geology, glacial geology, out of the University of Chicago, where he was working for a PhD when he wasn't teaching at Earlham College. And so there's been that length of connection with Wisconsin. I came here in 1938 to the graduate school to work in geology and soil science. And it was, of course, a wonderful thing for me that there was a Friends meeting here, attended with such enthusiasm by a small group, mostly connected with the university.
How did you happen to choose Wisconsin at that time?
Well, my father encouraged me to come up here. I could say also that two other places that I applied were unsure whether they wanted me, because I had my record, although it was high enough in the quality of scholarly achievement, was strange, because it had a master's degree in French after a bachelor's degree at Earlham in geology and biology. And these two other universities were kind of put off by that. They thought I didn't know what I wanted to do. If I had gone off in the wilderness of French literature and now wanted to come back and get a PhD in geology, that was something they couldn't feel comfortable about. But Wisconsin had no such problems with my record. They said, well, just come right on up. And it was a good place with some good people in the geology department. And I suppose my father, he never said anything about his prior experience at that time, but he felt comfortable about Wisconsin. So, but it was just the right place, the right time for me.
Your parents remained in Indiana?
Yeah. She's 38. He taught 2 more years at Earlham. My mother lived 1 more year. She died in 1939, and he died in 1940. And then I was invited to go and take his place, which is one of the finest things that can happen to a person, you know, to be asked to take his father's place like that. I was really lucky to find the meeting here. I'm writing up a biography of my parents, and it seemed that Quaker institutions were founded just in time. Well, not just Quaker institutions, educational institutions were being founded in this country just in time for my mother and father. Of the Plainfield Academy at Plainfield, Indiana, near Indianapolis, was founded just a few years before he needed such an academy. And then Earlham College was turned from an academy into a college just about the time he needed to go to Earlham. And then the University of Chicago was organized about 10 years before he found himself needing to get a PhD in geology. It's just amazing how these stepping stones were suddenly appearing right in the front of the, you might say, the walking young people. A lot of people were thinking about all those young people that were coming up and were preparing it for them. And then I felt the same way. When I came up here was a little meeting, and these faculty members and school teachers and whatnot were teachable people. They really had a nice attitude. To have scholarly people sit in Friends meeting and be silent most of the time, I thought was quite an accomplishment, because they too were like children. We were all like children, you know, in a sense, coming to grow spiritually. It was just a marvelous thing for me.
How large a group was that?
Well, I imagine it was about a dozen. 10 to 12 would gather, and we would meet in homes. We didn't have any meeting house at the time. We would meet in different homes. We'd have meeting, and then shortly after 1938, I don't know just how soon, we began meeting in religious student houses for students around. Congregational student house, Presbyterian student house, Baptist student house. These places would let us use their student houses, the living rooms, on first day mornings. As I recall, a meeting was at 9 o'clock. And I would attend meeting, and then I would go out of those meetings just absolutely energized. Scarcely touching the sidewalk. And then I would go to a regular church service, Lutheran one time, Catholic, Presbyterian, Unitarian, Baptist. I seemed to want to do that, have the unprogrammed and then a programmed.
So on the same Sunday?
And on the same, yeah.
You would go from one to the other?
Yeah.
Would you say that the nucleus of friends that were worshiping in Madison at the time were mostly birthright friends, or?
Oh, no, I think Irma Duncan, Millard Ashman were, but I think the rest, and I was, but the rest of these people were drawn to Friends, of course, because of the work of the American Friends Service Committee, the actual practice of the religious motivation, as well as the meditative, quiet waiting in worship. They were people who didn't want to be distracted from discovering their own path as individuals and as a small group. It's the smallness of the group that was a real power. And I think that's important, that these unprogrammed Friends meetings not allow themselves to get too big.
It's my understanding of your background that up until that point, your association with Friends has been with program meetings.
Well, it was with, I grew up in a program meeting because of the transformation of Friends in the Great Lakes area between 1875 and 1900, from unprogrammed, most of them, from unprogrammed to programmed. And I grew up, of course, I was born in 1913, so I grew up in a thoroughly programmed meeting. It had a beautiful spirit to it, and it was a nice community, friendly community. But it was certainly programmed. And it wasn't until I went to Earlham College in 1929, entered as a freshman, that I became aware that there was an unprogrammed group on the campus. Professors and students sat down, about a dozen of them, in what we call the faculty parlor in Carpenter Hall. And I just thought I couldn't believe it. That seemed to be so extraordinary to have faculty and students sit down in such a small, intimate group. And I attended so that I began, therefore, having the unprogrammed meeting experience in undergraduate years at Earlham College. We graduated in 1933. Then I went to Haverford College on a scholarship to get a master's degree in French, which was my love at the moment, at that time. And of course there I sat in unprogrammed meetings, voluntary on first days, but compulsory on fifth days. All students who went to Haverford, they were all men then, it was a men's college, had to promise that they would attend meeting, whether they were whatever religious persuasion or non-persuasion that was theirs. They can't do it now. It would just not be, it's not tolerated now. They stopped that compulsory business. But then it was not being revolted against very much. And to sit there with Rufus Jones sitting on the facing benches, and William Worcester Comfort at Haverford, a meeting house that was really old compared with the college campus that I'd come from, 100 years older, or almost. It was a great experience there. William Worcester Comfort, who also sat on the facing bench, I remember William Worcester Comfort was president of the Haverford College, and my memory of him is somebody who never stood and spoke. He always broke meeting, and he did it without a watch. He would be able to sense when the meeting was over, and he'd reach over and shake hands and terminate the meeting without a timepiece. But he never stood and spoke. And I think that his keeping silence, that quality of real deep dedication, made as much impression on me as the messages that Rufus Jones gave, and he spoke almost every first day. To me, he was just marvelous. Such a kind of a homespun farmer professor. And then I got jobs at boarding school, Friends boarding schools. Friends Central Country Day School was the first one I got a job. To get a job in 1934 in the Depression was quite an achievement. I was pretty lucky. I was paid $600 that year, that academic year, and lived in the home of the Barclay and Esther Jones. Barclay Jones was the headmaster of that school, and that was right close to Haverford, on the outskirts of Philadelphia. And then I got a job at Westtown Boarding School for 3 years. And of course, at these places, there were unprogrammed Friends meetings with the whole student body in them.
I imagine the meeting in Madison must have been delighted when you first started attending meetings. With the background of Quakerism.
We always were delighted to have another person come with a smile and enthusiasm. We were so few, you know. We were each was so delighted to see somebody coming in. Lelia Bascom was quite a power in the meeting. And when I came in 1938, and she's, I think, retired the next year early, at age 60, from her position as an associate professor of English in extension, because she had found what she needed. She had been a Baptist. She was what was she? She said, I'm a Quaker with a Baptist hangover. She'd walked out of the Baptist church during the First World War, when from the pulpit military sermons were given. She thought, well, this isn't Jesus' church. And then she found out through the Fellowship of Reconciliation that there was such a thing as Society of Friends, and so she'd found what she wanted, and she wanted to retire early so she could really spend full time being a Quaker, being a friend. She went to yearly meetings, she went to conferences. So she meant an awful lot to the group. And then, of course, there was Merritt and Grace Hughes. Merritt Hughes, chairman of the English department. Grace Hughes had come from California, I believe. And there was Helen Groves, wife of Harold Groves, a prominent economics professor. And Irma Duncan that I mentioned. We were few, as I've said, and we were really enthusiastic about our little fellowship. And
those must have been fairly troubled times, though.
Sure were, and that's one reason that.
Dick, I want to take a break for a minute. Okay. Change the lighting a little bit, drastically rather. And give you a chance to rest your eyes and.
Is there too many flashing reflections? Well, anyhow.
I just think it would be better.
Okay.